So this next lecture that we are going to be going through is metadata creation. This is largely a hands-on presentation, so hopefully you find it interesting, you find it enlightening, helpful, because we've talked a lot about metadata. The FAIR data principles are very, very involved in kind of the concepts around metadata and why metadata is important. And so it's important for us in this bootcamp to actually give you some tools to create metadata if you ever need to. So that's me. So we talked, Dr. Chakravarthy talked a little bit about what metadata is, so hopefully you have a pretty good understanding of it now. And we have, this is very limited metadata, but just an example of what might be good metadata and bad metadata. And so just for a water quality data set on the Mississippi River, you can see that for title, description, keywords, spatial coverage, temporal coverage, creator, publisher, access, and data format are all filled out for this good metadata example. And then for the bad metadata example, the only thing that is known is that it's water data and that this data set contains water data. And so it's very, very limited, as you can see, and that has a bunch of fields that are missing, fields that would be critical for you to understand if you were actually going to download this data set. There's little more frustrating when you're actually in the beginning stages of research than looking for a good data set that you can use, looking, and you find one that you think you can use, but you don't know if you can use it till you download it and actually have the chance to look at the data yourself. And that comes as a result of metadata not being clear, not being being present for you to actually understand what the resolution of this data set is, temporally, spatially, what its coverage is, and all that. So metadata helps ease that headache a bit. So in terms of metadata creation, a lot of it is gathering all the content that needs to go into the metadata before you start generating it. So what goes into metadata, abstract, methods, keywords, etc. There's actually some really good tools available, which I thought I would show you. Give me a second. I have it open on my other screen. Okay. So there's a couple links that are shown here, and we can put them up on the My GeoHub page, but these are the types of information. This is a 34-page document, so like I said, it's gathering a lot of content. These are the types of information that you should have in order to build your metadata, to have a fully well-developed metadata that kind of answers all the key questions for people. So for example, you have to cover all the ideas about what does the data set describe, who produced the data set, why was the data set created, how was the data set created, how reliable are the data, what problems remain in the data set, how can someone get a copy of the data set, who wrote the metadata. So these are kind of the 7 most basic categories for what type of information we need to gather for creating metadata. And so these are kind of large font titles in blue. Oops, I did not mean to click that. Are sorry, are the kind of the overarching theme, but then the numbers below, the numbered questions below, are the actual more specific questions that will help you guide that. And in terms of talking about what the data set describes, that's pretty broad, but these 1 through 6 here, for example, will tell you exactly what is appropriate to put in the metadata. So we also have similarly a metadata questionnaire form, which if you were going to develop the metadata yourself, this is something that you could go through and answer all of these questions that are listed here and attach this to your data set. This would be a pretty rudimentary way to develop your metadata, but it's better than nothing, and it could be the first step that you do before you actually go through the work of creating your metadata. So this is much more succinct than the previous document, but the previous document has a lot more sort of additional guidance that might be helpful. So both of these are useful in terms of creating your metadata. So let's go back to our slides. Oh, it says next, or you can use a tool to create your metadata, which is what we are going to do today. So federal agencies are mandated to use metadata standards endorsed by the Federal Geographic Data Committee, or FGDC. There's two different types of metadata standards that are endorsed. One is the Content Standard for Digital Geospatial Metadata, or CSDGM, a mouthful. The next is the International Organization for Standardization Series of Standards, or ISO. So both of these standards require metadata to be formatted in what's called the extensible markup language, or .xml. You may or may not have seen this format. I wish I would have pulled up an example for you before we started this, but let's see if we can pull up one quickly. But if ever you see a page that looks kind of like this with multiple indented level or indentations and descriptions kind of like this is different types of XML documents. So they're not something that's super easy to read just by yourself sitting here all the time. It can be hard to find the information in it, but it's great for computer readability, machine readability. So computers, Python included, are really good at reading XML. So it's helpful to have your metadata created in the .xml language. So there's a bunch of tools, like I've kind of mentioned, for creating metadata records. One is the USGS Metadata Wizard. This was kind of the first attempt at creating a metadata wizard by the USGS. It integrated with really closely with Esri, ArcGIS software, which some or all of you may be familiar with. But the problem is that ArcGIS is proprietary software, right? So it wasn't friendly for the masses, basically, right? You had to pay for access to ArcGIS. So now they have created the USGS Metadata Wizard 2.0, and there are various releases after that. But this is basically the same thing, but it's more flexible, it's more capable, and then it's independent of ArcGIS, so you can use it for any data set that you want. It is specifically designed for geospatial data. With that being said, it does not have to be used for geospatial data. Essentially, if you leave pieces relevant to geospatial data blank, it'll be fine. It just won't show up, which is great. So this is the tool that we will be using today. I've sent the link around a couple different times, and the link is in the chat for downloading this if you haven't done so yet. So these are some other tools for creating metadata records. Whether or not you choose to use any of these tools would be dependent upon which domain you're working with, what kind of the standard is for your discipline. With that being said, as we kind of found out when we were working on this content, that the USGS and kind of the water domain are really good about metadata and metadata standards and understanding the importance of it. Which is probably largely because we do work with a lot of large geospatial data sets. So having that metadata information is really important for actually being able to use any data that you find online. But in other industries, like Dr. Chakrabarty was saying, data science is actually not that great about creating metadata for their own data sets that they work with. And Dr. Park was also saying similar things for the energy industry or the building energy industry, that metadata can be quite sparse. So hopefully the understanding of the importance of metadata will increase over the years, and we'll get more people on board with actually creating metadata, so that again, increases the usability of our data. So with that being said, these are some of the other tools that are available, which may be more appropriate than the USGS Metadata Wizard, depending on what you're working with. So for the first is USGS TKME, which is a Windows tool for creating, I'll read this whole thing, FGDCCSDGM, which can be configured for biological data profile and other extensions. There's an MD editor, which creates both ISO and FG FGDC CSDGM metadata with this web-based tool. There's a data dictionary conversion service where you can convert a data dictionary or table to or from metadata, the metadata format, which is XML, and it's helpful that it comes with instructions. The USDA also has their own version. It's called MetaVist, which is a desktop metadata editor for creating FGDCCSDGM. I need a new acronym for that, for geospatial metadata. And then the last one that's listed here is a Microsoft XML notepad. This is the most basic. It's just, essentially a notepad for writing your own metadata, whatever you think is appropriate in the XML format. So it does not automatically produce FGDC CSDGM records, but it's really easy to use if you don't have any sort of expertise or interest in trying to find and use a different type of metadata creator. So I'll talk a little bit more about the, well, I guess first, before we carry on, does anybody have any questions about kind of this introduction to metadata creation? No? Okay. Sounds good. Thanks for the feedback, Joseph. All right, so let me pull my screen back up. Maybe. So the USGS Metadata Wizard is a desktop application that creates and edits XML metadata records. It's automatically in the CSDGM format, which is great. Essentially what you do with this wizard is you pull it up, you fill out all the boxes, and it automatically populates an XML metadata record, which is pretty great. Helps with your workflow process. The metadata wizard has the capability to parse information from certain geospatial and tabular file types to populate required fields in the metadata, and can partially automate the process of describing column and value definitions. So it'll save you a little bit of time. If you have a big data set, you don't have to go through and specify everything or find each bit of information. Sometimes it can just pull it in for you, which is great. You should always double check to make sure they did it correctly, but it'll save you some time. And then users have the option to pull contact information from the USGS directory, keyword terms from the USGS thesaurus, taxonomic information from the integrated taxonomic information system, ITIS, and citation elements from metadata associated with digital object identifiers, or DOIs. The metadata wizard is pretty nice because it also produces provides an inbuilt validator. So you push the validation button, it'll go through, check all of your information, and it highlights really clearly in red what you're missing. So it's really easy to figure out what elements might need to be addressed further. So the process for working with the USGS Metadata Wizard is pretty straightforward. There's a bunch of tabs at the top, and you just go through them. The first is identification, then you'll talk about data quality, give the spatial information, entity and attribute, distribution, and then lastly, the metadata reference. So I will pull up, I already have it open because it takes a little bit to open, but this is the metadata wizard. This is what it looks like. This is the first page where we have identification here. So the metadata wizard is really helpful because it gives you really good descriptions of what you need. So for example, the first piece is the dataset title that tells you what a good data set should include, or a good data title should include. It tells you basically that additional description for every single piece pretty much, which I personally love. There's nothing more painful than trying your very best to fill out a form that uses terms you're not familiar with, right? And so if you've never created metadata before or worked with metadata before, or English isn't your first language and you're trying to fill this out and it says data use constraints, what does that mean? But right here it says describe any restrictions or legal prerequisites for using the data, use constraints, may include restrictions applied to assure the protection of privacy or intellectual property and any special restrictions or limitations on using the dataset. So just as an example, it does a really good job of helping you understand what actually belongs in each box if it's not uh, intuitive for you. It provides a space for you to put in a DOI for your dataset, an online link to your dataset. We talked a little bit in the Fair Data Principles about using controlled vocabularies. You can search directly on here controlled vocabularies for anything, basically. It's a little bit slow, but it can do it, and then it will, oh, hey, it's fast. Fast on my computer at work. Cool. So it can you can pull up any of these controlled vocabulary terms and pick out the ones that are most appropriate for what you're working with. There's tons and tons of options, and they have a lot of different controlled vocabulary sources. Basically, you can look and see through all here and pick the ones that are maybe most appropriate for you. Similarly, they have controlled vocabularies for places. So these are the official place names if you're not sure exactly what the formal place name is for where your research is located and whatnot. So this is the identification page. They have similar description for data quality, talking about how accurate it is and how consistent it is and complete, which is always very useful to have. Spatial information, this is one where you can put it in manually, or you can just browse to your data set. If it's a shapefile or a TIFF file or anything like that, it can just grab the information automatically, which is great. This is the entity and attribute table. This is essentially for when you need to describe a tabular file or similar, where you need to talk about all the labels and the description and what every column means and whatnot. And this can also do it automatically. If you load up in your CSV, it can try to pull everything for you automatically. Again, it might have some errors, so you definitely need to double check, but the hope is that it will, ease your workload a little bit. So the next tab is the distribution tab. This is talking about accessing the data and how it's going to be distributed and who is actually doing the process of distributing it. So you might be the one creating the data and the one responsible for it, but perhaps you cede control of the data set basically to the USGS, for example, and they are hosting on one of their repositories. So they're the ones distributing this data set. So you put that type of information here. And then the last one is the metadata reference. So this is your information. If you are the one creating the metadata, the one who understands most about the metadata and what you meant to say when you were writing that, that goes here in the metadata contact. And this is also just standards. You probably wouldn't need to change this information because it's just the standard for what this metadata wizard is doing, basically. So this is the metadata wizard that we will be using for our example today. Before I move on, any questions on using this metadata wizard? I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but as with anything, it can be a little confusing the first time you work with it. No? Okay. So I will click through. I just chose to talk to you through it with the actual tool instead. So if you have, if you have not yet had the opportunity to download, Joel says, will we see what the program produces? Yes, thank you, Joel. So if you go up here to File, you save as, it automatically saves it as a XML, so it will export whatever you put in here as an XML file. So yes, you can save it and see what it produces. Which, thank you for asking that, because it reminded me about the validation. So this tab up here, validation, is where you run validation. And everything's red because I haven't filled anything out. But this is what it shows you. Any other questions? Okay, so if you have not downloaded this yet, I will put this link in the chat. And this is what it will look like when you pull it up. It says Metadata Wizard User Guide. You can scroll down here kind of to the middle of the page, and it has instructions for installing it on whatever machine you have. I have a Windows. So I came here to this page, and if you just click the exe and download it and install it, it works pretty easily, pretty simply. The next piece is to go to the My GeoHub page. Yours probably looks a little different from mine, but if you go to metadata creation, you can download the data set for the metadata activity right here under Wednesday's lectures. Oh, I'm not logged in. Okay, so here is the file that will be downloaded. This is a file from a USGS, a USGS station. It already has a bunch of metadata type of information in it, which here's some information about the location. Here is a description of all of the columns, and then this is all of the information that's provided. So just for an example data set to work with the metadata creation wizard USGS tool, I thought this would be a good pretty like self-contained example for how you can practice working with the metadata wizard and just see how it works for yourself. So that is what we are going to be doing for pretty much the rest of this time. Before we kind of break for that, does anybody have any questions?
My question is, how did you get this Excel file? Are we supposed to have it too?
It's in the course page.
I think mine is not there.
No? Okay, let me double check.
For
Are other people also not seeing it?
For Wednesday or Tuesday?
It's for Wednesday, metadata creation.
Mine is empty.
It is, okay. Let me look at this and I will tell you in just a moment. It's empty. Okay, it says it's published for me. Is it empty for everybody?
I think I see something there that says this unit has prerequisites that have not yet been met. Begin by completing Tuesday.
Okay, so I can make it change the prerequisite.
I have to relog in again.
Try to just reload the page and see if you can see it now.
Okay. Yeah, something comes in.
It's good now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
So which of them am I using? Introduction to that? No, principle of interoperability.
It is metadata creation.
Okay, there you go.
And then the, what's it called? It says, yeah, data set for metadata activity.
Data set for metadata activity. Okay.
That's the Excel file.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I will make sure I stay on here until, let's see, we're supposed to take a break at 2:45, so about another half an hour, and then we will reconvene at 3 p.m. for the data usage licensing. But like I said, this is just an activity for you to work on it and see how it's going. So I'll probably check back in 5 minutes from the end or so and just see how it's going. But I'll also be here in case you have any questions or want to chat about the metadata tool or anything like that. And if you have a data set that you want to use instead of using the sample data set, go for it. It's completely up to you.
Okay. Is there any direction on what we are supposed to be doing with the data?
So you have the data set, and
Yes.
hopefully you have downloaded the metadata wizard. So
Yes.
just go through and fill out as much as you can and get as familiar as you can with this metadata wizard. You know, you can even save it and see what it looks like. You can try running validation. Just you know, fill it out as much as you can to the best of your ability.
Okay. All right.
And you know, get familiar with it as much as possible.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Hi, Jessica. I have a question real quick.
Yes. What's up,
Yeah.
Joseph?
Yeah. In terms of this program, something like this training courses, how do one establish a career in this part or get further training in order to enhance a career in this perspective?
Mm-hmm. So you're asking specifically how to improve your data, like your data science skills?
Yes.
To get trainings?
Yes.
I mean, the best way to do it is if you're in a PhD program right now, is to just, you know, try to use as much of these kind of tools as you can in your own research. And then you're creating evidence for future employers that this is something that you're familiar with, and you know, through publishing your work, maybe you work on some data sets that you're able to publish and whatnot. And the nice thing about data science is that there's a very active online user community, tons of online resources that can help you learn to improve your data science skills, which, you know, something like this bootcamp is part of. And so you can become, I won't say, you know, the top tier data scientist through these online programs, but you can become a very good civil engineer with data science skills, for example, through these types of programs.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. So, for example, I am like completely self-trained in terms of data science. I taught myself Python.
Okay.
You know, when I was in my PhD, and I taught myself C# when I was doing a research like visiting scholar stint in the Netherlands for the research I was doing there. So just if it's something that's interesting to you and you enjoy it, just you know, find every opportunity you can to use it to improve your workflows.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can learn quite a bit.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, so thank you, Junaid. It says, so for example, under dataset title, I should be coming up with my own title for the dataset. Yes. In this case, I would say that's a good choice. Oh, it's full screen. Okay. So this is, yeah, there isn't really a data set. This right here is the name of the station. So if you're coming up for a data set title for it, I mean, you could put, you know, the station name and then just talk, say something about which type of data it is. So in this case, we have some flow data, some stage data, and then we have a bunch of water quality data. So your title would want to include probably the station data and then talking mostly about what type of data it is. So yeah, you'll just have to come up with something that you think is descriptive. You might be right that it's more of an exercise in reading the data set than the wizard. So retrieval would retrieval be publication date? This is the publication date. This is, you're talking about from the data set, retrieval be the retrieval of when this data set was downloaded? What do you mean by, oh, this? That's what you're talking about. So no, this is the date that it was downloaded from the website, basically, the USGS website. the publication date, this is the date that the data set would be made available. So if you planned to publish your data set tomorrow, that would be tomorrow's date. So that's also something that you would just make up at this point, since you're not actually publishing this data set. So we have another question. It says, under the online link to the dataset, can I add automated retrieval info or something else? Which tab is this on? Oh, online link to the dataset. Is there a link to the data? So in this case, this link is going to come from wherever you deposit the data. So if you create your data set and you deposit it on Zenodo or something, Zenodo would have a DOI, which is similar to the format which is shown here, for your data set. And that is what you would put in here as the online link to the data set. It would be wherever you deposited it, whatever that website URL was for directly accessing that data set. That's what would go there. If by automated retrieval information, you're talking about the type of API information that was discussed in the data access lecture, that would go, I'm not sure that would go in the metadata. Usually, if you're downloading it from a repository, you wouldn't necessarily have an API or anything like that for specific to your data set. You would use it from the repository or use more general tools just for downloading links from HTTPS sites, which are also available. Does that answer your question, Axa? Cool. All right, folks, so we just have a few minutes left in this scheduled session. How's it going creating the metadata for this sample data set?
I think I'm the only one that don't know what to do here.
Oh yeah? Well, what's giving you trouble?
Okay, what am I supposed to be filling in on that? I have the tab bars that say identification, data quality, spatial, entity, and attributes. Okay, citation. The citation is coming from the Excel file.
So you're talking which okay, so for data quality,
I'm still on identification.
Okay. Data quality. Where does it say data quality?
No, under identification, on my metadata wizard.
Yes.
Identification.
And then
Data set title. Am I going to draw like from what am I supposed to do with it?
For the data set title.
Okay. USGS water data for USA.
Yeah,
or
so
I
you
just
could
have to make
you just make up something that would be good for this given data set. So you look at it, see what it is, and just make something up that would be appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then put on today's date then.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, for when you would publish it.
Okay. Then on the name, I put on the name there, originator.
Yeah, who created the data set? So if that was you.
Okay. Type directly in the box. Data set format.
Yeah, so it gives you, a drop-down list, and in this case, it's a spreadsheet.
Spreadsheet. Yeah. Okay. External link, online link to the data set.
Yeah, so this would be as I mentioned earlier, if you were to upload this into a repository, it would give you a URL to put in here
Okay, but
because
since
it
we
would
are
be
not,
online available. Yeah.
okay, just leave it like that.
Yes. So we also have a question in the chat from Joel, which says, should we attach the dataset file under the entity and attribute tab? So yes, if you are able to attach the dataset here, it should be able to pull the information in there for you directly. So let's see if it succeeds. It might not actually because there's a bunch of metadata up at the top in this case. But for example, if you load it in its current format, it should probably be reformatted before you do this. It does, fill in a bunch of information that you could then fill out. So you would probably want to reformat the Excel sheet before you did this, to be honest. But it has all the column labels, and then you could put the column definitions in there, where you talk about like what the units are for the data or for that column and whatnot. Okay, cool. I'm glad that the CVS worked for you, Joel. So it is 12:45 right now. Are there any last minute questions on this? I know it's maybe a little bit frustrating to not fully succeed in this metadata wizard exercise since you are working with a data set that you're unfamiliar with. But hopefully you get an idea of how we can create metadata, what it looks like, what kind of requirements it has, and that if and when you do get to the point where you're ready to publish a data set, you actually have access to most, or if not all of this information, and kind of know where to find it and know where to how to populate these fields a little bit better. Before we break, are there any last minute questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you all for your attention. Oh, hold on. One last minute question. It says, how long will we have access to the activity, exercises, and material content on MyGeoHub? Is it until Friday or a certain amount of time after the bootcamp? So, as far as I know, the content on the bootcamp or on MyGeoHub will be available essentially indefinitely. Um, we're not planning to take down the course at any point or unpublish the course at any point. It's out there for you to use and for anyone else who is interested in learning this content to use. We might improve some of the content, change some of the content as we kind of iterate this bootcamp, but the intent is that it will be available long term. Okay, so any other last minute questions? Yeah, you're welcome, Daniel.